How's it going, everyone? In this video I'm going to show you how to make spicy goose jerky. We're going to be taking goose meat like this and turning it into jerky like this. So the ingredients you're going to need for this recipe are 3 tablespoons of coarse salt, 1 cup of brown sugar, 3/4 cup of soy sauce, 1/2 cup of Worcestershire sauce, 1 cup of water, 2 tablespoons of garlic powder, 2 tablespoons of chili powder, 3 tablespoons of coarsely ground black pepper, and 2 tablespoons of red pepper flakes. Okay, so once you have all your ingredients out, you're going to have to combine them in a bowl, and then you will stir them. It doesn't matter the order you combine them, just everything in one bowl. You'll stir them together, and that'll be the marinade first, the strips of meat like this that'll go in there. Once you have the strips of meat cut and everything, you'll have to let them sit in the marinade for about 24 hours usually is enough. I've done it anywhere from 12 hours to 48 hours, what I've done. Sometimes I prefer to do it around 24. If you do a little bit less, sometimes you can tell it's not quite as good, but anywhere around there will usually be fine. So how you're going to cut the meat is, these have been sitting in the fridge for a little while, so what you're going to want to do is anything that looks like a little bit brown, you're going to want to cut that off, because that's not going to taste good. So cut all that nonsense off. And then you'll see on the back here, you can tell on the camera, but there's a layer of silver skin here. It's very tough, and like this right here, this is good to show like that right there. And the back doesn't have that. The back's just the meat. So what I like to do is I almost think of it like taking the skin off a fish or something after you get a fillet. You can take your knife and go right down under that. And take that off like that. It's a lot easier if you use a fillet knife too for this, and it has to be pretty sharp. I always sharpen my knife before I do this. It makes a big difference. There's some of your scraps there. There's still a little bit of silver skin here, but we can take that off pretty easily. So then what you're going to do is just make sure it's all trimmed up. Okay. So now I have my fillet laying out here like this. Or not my fillet, sorry, my goose breast. And I'm going to cut the strips of jerky this way down the breast. So that'd be a piece right there. That's another piece, and it's about, I don't know, maybe a 1/4 inch wide or so, somewhere around that lines. Some people prefer to cut it like this way, like almost like cut it down like that. I don't know. Those pieces usually taste tougher to me. I prefer the smaller strips like this because they're a lot easier to eat and snack on them quicker. Cut them like that. Anything that looks weird, like that's a little bit of a fat or a vein or something, and cut that out. Yeah, and just kind of keep going down like that. It's going to take a little while, but you'll start to get a pile up. And what you, before I put these strips of meat into my marinade, I'll usually give them a once over, just rinse them off real quick, and then dunk them in, just in case there's any blood or feathers on there. Also, a good thing to do too is when you're cutting the meat, it's good to run your fingers down. Like, it's kind of gross, but if you run your fingers down it, just make sure there's no maybe you shot your geese with a shotgun. Just make sure there's no shot in there, because you don't want anyone to break a tooth on or anything. I've had shot in it. It's usually not a big deal, but it's always good to check if you can prevent it. Okay, so this is what the jerky in the marinade will look like. You're going to leave this in the fridge for around 24 hours. It's probably a good idea to stir it occasionally just to make sure all the meat's completely submerged. Like, at least as submerged as it can be. Okay, so now your jerky's been marinating. Mine's been marinating for about 24 hours or so. You're going to go ahead and grab a cookie sheet and some drying racks for cookies or something. I'd like to put foil under it just so the cleanup's a little bit easier. And then all you're going to do is you're going to take your strips like this, strips like that, and you're just going to lay them out on the sheet. And try to get a little bit of space in there so they can dry out nicely. And then once you put all your strips on here, you're going to have this sit in the fridge for another hour. And while you're doing that, it's a good idea to heat up your oven. And the oven, you're going to want to bring it to about 180 or so, 185, because you're going to want your jerky to get up to about 160 degrees. That's going to ensure that everything inside is dead and it'll be safe to eat. Okay, so I got the oven heated up to 175 degrees now, and the jerky has been sitting in the fridge for about an hour. I'm going to put it in the oven and leave it there for an hour or until the internal temperature of the jerky reaches 160 degrees. And then at that point, you're going to lower the temperature of the oven. Okay, so this is about the halfway point of the jerky. It's going to be pretty flexible still. You can feel a little bit wet still maybe. My oven temperature is about 150 degrees. Probably it should be a little bit lower. I actually moved it to the lower. We have like a warming oven on this particular stove or oven. You can it's used for warming bread and stuff, so I can keep it at a lower temperature. But you can probably get away with using the big oven. You might have to leave it open while you're cooking it a little bit, or just put on the lowest setting you can. Maybe move it to the far out edge to keep it cooler. But this works good if you have something like this. Yeah, so I just flipped it over, and that's about it for now. Keep you updated next step. Okay, so I just took the jerky out of the oven. It was in there for about 5 hours, and then I flipped it over, so another 4 or 5 hours or so. And I can tell it's starting to get done, and like some of the smaller pieces, I can start to break them in half. Like they start to crumble a little bit. That probably means a little bit overdone, but I like to make sure it's safe to eat. And a big key to do here when you're done with it, you don't want to put it right into a bag. You want to let it sit out for at least an hour or two, because there's a lot of moisture still inside the jerky. But after it stops cooking, I guess, or drying out, all the moisture will come out. And then after that, I like to put it in a bag, and then I store it in the refrigerator to make sure it stays the longest.